Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson, and in this series of episodes we're looking at Poland's relations with neighbouring states, and I'm joined to discuss this with Professor Krzyszof Jabłonka. Professor, in 1991 the Soviet Union collapsed, and of course into this vacuum, particularly in Ukraine and Belarus, there was an opportunity for Poland to sort of expand. Did Poland take advantage of this?
Yes, it was a wonderful moment. Belarus especially experienced a rebirth. It was reborn in the sense that its original national colors were restored. Poles learned for the first time that Belarusians still had a national white and red flag as recently as 1918. It was taken from a beautiful Renaissance painting depicting the Battle of Orsha in 1514, where Belarusian troops fought under such a flag with Polish and Lithuanian troops against Muscovy. The coat of arms, which referred to the Lithuanian coat of arms, the Belarusian pogoń, was also restored. The contacts between Poland and Belarus were very promising after our eastern neighbor seceded from the Soviet Union, especially when Belarusian President Stanisław Szyszkiewicz visited Poland. Unfortunately, the economic structure that was once imposed by the Soviet Union played an ominous role in this situation. All oil and gas pipelines ran from the depths of Russia. When President Szyszkiewicz asked for Poland's help in cutting off the Soviet supply, the Poles replied they could not do so. That left Belarus in a vacuum, and the Russian security agencies used it to their advantage. Alexander Lukashenko's election campaign turned out to be the last campaign in which Belarusians had any choice. Once elected, Lukashenko transformed Belarus to such an extent that it became a dictatorship. Only recently did Belarus wake up to the fact that it might be facing the fate of Russia and started fighting for its independence. The Poles have once again come to Belarus's aid, but it is worth remembering that Lithuania was also a great supporter of Belarusian independence. These two countries have a common history, as they had formed a common state for over 600 years. Lithuania and Belarus merged with Poland and Ukraine. This is how the former republic was constructed. Thus, the old historical dependencies return, and they are able to build some resistance against the imperial attempts of present Russia. In the Ukraine, it turned out a little differently. It was a powerful country and initially was not threatened by aggression from Russia, so an independent government was maintained. It was only the attempt to impose Yanukovych and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine that made them realize that their nation's sovereignty is threatened. And following the Maidan Revolution, Russia invaded Ukraine's eastern territories.
Professor, you mentioned the Orange Revolution of 2004. What effect did that have on Ukraine, and how did Poland participate in that movement?
It was a great awakening. Polish sympathy for Ukraine was great, especially among the youth. There was a beautiful demonstration in front of Józef Piłsudski's monument as we recalled his friendship and mutual defense treaty with Ataman Semen Petlura. A very catchy slogan was created: Kiev, Warsaw, it's a common cause. Of course, we were all aware of the fact that these slogans were primarily proclaimed against the reviving Russian imperialism. The interest in Ukrainian culture was also growing rapidly. Until then, Poles treated Ukraine as if it was a part of Russia. Now that Ukraine's distinctiveness has blossomed, we perceived it as a sign of good things to come. Their historical narrative changed. We have underlined the common history of Ukraine and Poland in extremely positive aspects. Same with Ukraine's independence efforts. Its culture and language have been appreciated. Many young Poles started learning Ukrainian. It was too late for me, because I had already learned Russian, and these two languages, though similar, are different and could be easily mistaken. However, Poles started to treat anything Ukrainian with respect. The Orange Revolution, which was a series of protests taking place between 2004 and 2005, prevented the elections in Ukraine from being falsified. After surviving an assassination attempt, Viktor Yushchenko won the repeated presidential elections. Unfortunately, this revolution was largely wasted. There were disputes between various parties, and after that brief period of hope, the Party of Regions, led by Viktor Yanukovych, came into power. This resulted in Russian influence growing in Ukraine to such an extent that the country ended up losing the territory of Crimea to Russia. The signing of the agreement until 2042 by Yanukovych's government de facto gave the Crimea to the Russians. Taking the Crimea away in 2014 was only a formality. After the demonstrations of Euromaidan, which happened between 2013 and 2014, Ukraine got rid of Yanukovych under the charge of treason. Nevertheless, Crimea was no longer recoverable. Soon it turned out that fighting began also in the eastern Ukrainian provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk. The community there was forced to become something intermediate between a Ukrainian and a Russian population.
That's all we've got time for on this edition. I'd like to thank my guest, Professor Krzyszof Jabłonka. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and do join us again as we delve into the annals of Polish history.